Hi everyone, this is Miss Africk here, and we're going to continue talking about graphing sine and cosine, but we've got a couple new things we're going to talk about, and that's the period change and the phase shift. Alright, so just like last time, I've got some info already written down. Please pause the video and write that same stuff down so that you have it in front of you, so that when I'm explaining it and talking about it, you don't have to be multitasking and trying to listen and write, right? That's difficult. So pause the video, write it down, then we'll get going. Alright, hopefully you paused, so now you're ready to go. Up here in red, you can see the stuff we already talked about. Amplitude is the absolute value of this A number here, and the vertical shift up or down is the D value you add on the end, and that's also called your midline. Alright, the new stuff. It's not new in the sense that we did write it down in the last set of notes, but it's new in the sense that we didn't change it much. Right now we're going to be messing around with it a little bit. So we have to really make sure we know it. Okay, the period is always going to be 2 pi divided by this b value. Alright, the interval is always the period divided by 4. So now that our period might be changing, the interval will change with it. Alright, and then our phase shift is this c value right here. And do you notice the negative? Yeah, that means we're going to do the opposite. Which makes sense, because remember last semester, any transformation that was inside, we did opposite. Alright, so because it's inside, we're doing the opposite there. The phase shift is a tricky part, because the phase shift is actually going to be our new starting x value. And some people don't realize what even our old starting x value was. So just to let you know, the old x value is x equals 0. We just started at nothing, right, at 0. And that's just kind of at the origin. Well, now we might be shifting that, and that's going to shift our graph left and right. So wherever we decide to start, if it's to the right of 0, we'd shift it right. To the left, we'd shift it left. Alright, we're going to start with some period changes, and then we'll get into phase shifts. Alright, so period changes first. Number 1, we have y equals 3 times the sine of 1/2 x. So these are the two that we've already talked about, so I might go through those a little quicker. These plus our phase shift, for some reason it's not written down, so go ahead and write it down if it's not on your sheet either. Oops, let's try that again. Not even close to better. Or whatever, I can't try it again. Alright, these are the new pieces, so I'm going to spend a little more time on them. Alright, amplitude comes from A. It's the absolute value of it. So just 3 here. And vertical shift is the number you're adding on the outside of the function, which here is nothing. We call it D, and that's nothing. So I'm going to say there's no vertical shift, none. Alright, same thing as 0, but I'm just using different wording now. Now's the new stuff. We can do it. Period, remember, period is 2 pi divided by the b value. What's b, you ask? It's this number right here, the one you're multiplying to x. Alright, so to get the period, we're going to do 2 pi divided by 1/2. But wait, I don't like to divide by fractions, right? So we're going to fix that a little bit. Instead of dividing by 1/2, we're going to actually multiply by the reciprocal, 2/1. Alright, so that's going to give me 4 pi here. Now the interval, remember, you take that period, that number you just got, and divide it by 4. So 4 pi divided by 4 is just pi. So that's my interval. The interval should always be smaller than the period because we're taking the period and we're dividing it into pieces, so keep that in mind. Alright, last piece is our phase shift. Phase shift is the opposite of the value that you're adding. Alright, so actually let me erase that. Phase shift is C, alright, which is the opposite of the value you're adding to x. And here I've got nothing I'm adding to x. So there is no C, that means there is no phase shift. Alright, when there's no phase shift, we just start at x equals 0. When there is a phase shift, we'll go left or right. Okay, let's try this. So, vertical shift is none. That means my midline's still this same line here. I don't have to draw a new one. And my amplitude is 3, so that means up 1, 2, 3, there's my max. Down 1, 2, 3, there's my min. Alright, for the x values, the ones along here, we do still want to graph 2 periods. So in case you're ever not sure how far that should be, you just take the period that you have and multiply it by 2. So 2 times 4 pi is 8 pi. That means the farthest out I should be from my starting value is 8 pi. Well, remember, starting value is x equals 0. I'll even label that, x equals 0 right here. So from 0, I'm going to add on 8 pi. That's where I'm going to end. Alright, to get the inside values, I'm going to add my interval. So I'm going to start at the beginning and just keep adding my interval until I get to this 8 pi that I'm looking for. Alright, so 0, if I add my interval, which is pi, gives me pi. Add it again, it's 2 pi. Add it again, we got 3 pi. Another time is 4 pi. This one's nice because there's no fractions, so I know we're good at that kind of adding, right? And 7 pi to get to 8 pi. Alright, so now I have my x values, I have my y values, it's time to graph. So in order to figure out how to start, again, I know I'm starting here, x equals 0, but now I need to know if I'm starting in the middle, at the max, or at the min. Well, to figure that out, we need to know if we have a positive or negative, sine or cosine. Well, since 3 is positive, and this is a sine, we have positive sine. Positive sine starts at the middle and goes up. So middle, then up. So add x equals 0, starting in the middle, going up, and then try and follow your pattern. Middle, max, middle, min. Middle, max, middle, min. If something ever doesn't quite look right, check that you followed your pattern correctly. Right, and there is our beautiful, slightly beautiful graph. Boom, done. Alright, let's try another one. Now, this one is going to have some fractions, I'm warning you now, but we're going to work through it together, so don't worry. Alright, once again, amplitude and vertical shift. Going to go through a little quicker. Amplitude, that's this number here, that's just a 1. Absolute value of 1 is 1. Easy enough. The vertical shift. Now, a lot of people mix up the vertical shift and, speaking of, add that in there, and the phase shift. We mix those up easily. So the biggest way to remember, let me scroll for a second, is that your phase shift will be in parentheses, always. Vertical shift is not. Alright? So in this one, since this minus 1 is not in parentheses, that is my vertical shift. And since it's a negative 1, I'm going to say that that means down 1. So we're shifting down 1. Alright, now the new stuff. Period. So again, remember, period is 2 pi divided by b. That is our b value. So the period here is 2 pi divided by 3. And that doesn't simplify, so there it is. The interval is period divided by 4. So if my period is 2 pi over 3, I would take 2 pi over 3 and divide it by 4. Once again, complex looking thing here. So instead of dividing by 4, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 4. And that gives me 2 pi over 12, which is pi over 6. So there is my interval. Alright, how about that phase shift? Do we see one here? Remember, the minus 1, since it's not in parentheses, that's our vertical shift, down 1. So I don't see anything else we're adding inside parentheses. That means we have no phase shift yet again. Remember, when there's no phase shift, we start at x equals 0, which would be right here. Okay? So I'll just label it 0 in case. Alright, let's get graphing. Now this one does have a vertical shift, we're going down 1. So instead of using this as my midline, I'm going to shift it down 1 and use this as my midline. And I like to draw my midline, so there we have it. Alright, then my amplitude is 1, so that means my max, I go up 1, there's 0. And it's a little confusing with both those zeros, why don't I make that easier? There's 0, and then down 1 to -2. So max is 0, min is -2. Alright, now my x's. Once again, 2 periods. So that means we're doing 2 times the period, which is, oopsies, keep doing that, which is 2 pi over 3. So that gives me 4 pi over 3. So my very end should be 4 pi over 3. Now to get everything in the middle, we're going to start with our interval, add it on to the beginning. Remember my beginning, this is 0. So if I add my interval, which is pi over 6, I'm going to get pi over 6. If I add another pi over 6 plus pi over 6 is 2 pi over 6, which simplifies to pi over 3. So my next one is going to be pi over 3. But this is where you have to be careful. Since I have to add another pi over 6, alright, I need a common denominator. So I'm going to add it to the one before I simplify. So 2 pi over 6 plus pi over 6, that's 3 pi over 6, which simplifies to pi over 2, so that's my next one. Once again, since I'm going to add another pi over 6, I'm going to add it to the one before I simplify, so I have a common denominator. So that's 4 pi over 6, which is 2 pi over 3. Hopefully you get that idea. Alright, if you're still stuck on getting these values, make sure you make a note of it and ask your teacher in class. Otherwise, we would just keep repeating this process until we got all of our values. So we would have 5 pi over 6, pi, 7 pi over 6. Oops, that was it. I think I went too far. Let's spread those out a little bit better, since I realized I had a little too much space there. So this was pi, and this is 7 pi over 6. And then we get to 4 pi over 3. Alright, let's start graphing. So once again, we know we're starting at x equals 0. That's my phase shift. That's where I start, right here. But I gotta know if it's at min, max, min, and what to do. So this one we have a positive cosine. Positive cosine means we start at the max. So I'm starting, I'll do it in red, right up here. And then follow your pattern. Max, middle, min. Middle, max, middle, min. Middle, max. That's my last one. And then just try your best to make it curved. It's difficult, but do the best you can. And there's my graph. Alright, let's see if we can try one more together. Number 3. Okay. I might go through this a little quickly, so just know that we'll go over it in class again in case you still have questions. Okay. Amplitude here, once again, just a 1. Vertical shift, I'm not adding anything, so there is no vertical shift. The period, this one's a little trickier, but remember b is this number you're multiplying to x. So it's just 1, so that means the period is 2 pi divided by 1, so just 2 pi. And if I divide that by 4, I get pi over 2. Now the one thing here that's different is my phase shift. I have one. Alright, you see that there? That's a negative pi over 2. Now remember, we do the opposite. So the opposite of negative pi over 2 would be positive pi over 2. And a phase shift, remember, that's right or left. So positive pi over 2 would mean I'm shifting right pi over 2. That means that the very first x value I use is going to be pi over 2. So I'm actually going to go ahead and label that real quick. Boom. First x value is pi over 2. Alright? To get the last x value, we repeat that process of 2 periods. Alright, that is 2 times the period, which is 2 pi, so 4 pi. Here's the difference. Now I have to add 4 pi to my new first value to get my last one. So pi over 2 plus 4 pi, we would need common denominators. So that would be 8 pi over 2. Pi over 2 plus 8 pi over 2 is 9 pi over 2. So that would be my last value. And then we would use our interval and keep adding to get the rest of them in between. Alright, we'll finish this one in class together. If you have any questions, write them down. See ya!